Welcome to Behind the Tools. Here's Tradify CEO and your host, Michael Steckler.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Behind the Tools. Delighted this week, we've got Rob Muldoon from Mind Your Head podcast. He also has a day job. Rob, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
No, it's a pleasure. Maybe Rob, might be worth starting. Do you want to just let people know who maybe haven't listened to the podcast, just give a little bit of background on your podcast and why you set it up?
Yeah, so the podcast is the Mind Your Head podcast, or we go by the name of MYHP because we needed to abbreviate it down. Well, if I'm totally honest with you, a charity in Scotland went for me full bore and they tried to shut me down, but that's another story. And so I set it up in November 2020 because I'd gone through a mental health journey a few years previous to that. And I wanted to get that message across to people within our industry that it is okay to have struggles with your mental health. It is okay to reach out for support, and you do get through this. And it can be very difficult for people to understand that. And I come from a big commercial construction background. So I used to work on these big high-rise buildings that you see being built all over the place. And the stigma that surrounded it, when I was at my lowest point, I never wanted to stand in front of a notice board and look at a poster to do with mental health where that sort of information was. And I thought, how can I get that message across where people can listen to that information or find that information and nobody else knows what they're looking for? They could be sat in the canteen area with just their earphones on, listening to the bit of information that they need, and nobody else in that room knows what's going on.
Right.
And like my biggest problem was I never spoke about how I was feeling, what I was going through. And a podcast, as you know, is all about talking. Yeah, and that's pretty much where the idea came from, and it's grown in arms and legs every week, and it's pretty much turned into a full-time job now, and I can't believe it, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah, it's amazing to see that happen, but also in some respects not surprising, because I think your story is not uncommon in the trades. There's some pretty alarming statistics worldwide, whichever country you go to, about the number of people in trades that are affected by mental health issues. And I think a lot of it is that sort of historic, inability to talk to each other about that or admit that there's something going on. And so was there a moment when you said, right, I'm going to do a podcast? What was the point you decided? Was that more therapy for yourself, or were you looking to help others? What was the intention behind that?
I think ultimately it was a way of portraying a message to people within the industry that they can do it, but it's definitely grown into my therapy. Working with the people that I work with now, a lot of the professional counselling and psychologist people that I work with, they're saying, you do know this is your therapy, you have turned this into your therapy. And I'm like, I never thought about it that way. And it is true, it is massively turned into this, because one, the satisfaction and the enjoyment I get out of it is unbelievable, because I say it all the time, I can write a wicked CV for all the amazing projects I've been part of, but they don't give me job satisfaction like I get off doing this work. It's so good and so satisfying, and it fulfills me and enables me to be me more than anything.
Yeah. No, I've heard that from we've had a couple of people on the show who've got YouTube channels, which I think initially started off as, them talking to YouTube more for themselves, just to have an outlet to sort of talk through what they're going through, particularly when the pandemic hit. I think that gave people some pause for reflection, and you're stopping, you're not working necessarily for a period of time. And sort of before you did the podcast, do you want to talk us through your career before that, what you were doing and what led you to this?
Yeah, absolutely. I started in the construction industry as an apprentice bricklayer all the way back in the year 2000, which only feels about 2.5 years ago, but it's a long time ago now. And I worked my way up to be a project manager for a big brickwork company in the northwest of England. I was running, like I said before, really big jobs, Man City's training ground. I was part of that. There was multi-storey apartments that I've worked on, a lot of MOD works, building military bases. The list goes on and on and on. And I thought I was doing great in my career. I had all this responsibility and doing all these great jobs, but all I was doing slowly was destroying my own life for work. And that had nothing to do with working for a bad contractor or working for bad customers. It was all to do with me not expressing what I was feeling and what I was struggling with. because and I still struggle with this, is a thing called imposter syndrome. So I used to sit in meetings and at work or wherever, whatever the environment was, and I used to think, I shouldn't be here. I'm not meant to be doing this job. I don't know how I've got here, and they're going to find me out. So what I used to do with that is I used to massively overthink, and I used to bury myself into work because I thought I need to come up with 10,000 solutions for problems that weren't there. But I thought, if somebody asks me this question, I can't turn around and say, oh, I don't know the answer to that. I need to know the answer because I'm in charge of this, and I should be doing this. And I didn't want my work to think I wasn't capable of my job. But it sort of all came to a head. I started really noticing things back in 2015. So back in 2015, I got married. I got a promotion at work. I got started having children. I moved house. And I was working on, at the time, the biggest project I'd ever worked on, and been part of the team to help deliver that project. And I started I started noticing things that weren't right. Like I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to go home from work. I didn't want to go to work. And I just started to feel a bit lost with everything.
Yeah.
And a couple of years went by and I just continued because I thought that's what life is. And it just comes with the territory of working in these high pressure environments. And I was meant to go away for the weekend with my wife and child, Seb, my eldest boy, because we only had one boy at the time. And I didn't want to be there. I should have booked the time off. I should have booked the Friday and the Monday and Tuesday off and make a nice long weekend of it. But I didn't. The site shut at 2:00 in the afternoon. I was still sat at my desk at 5:00 in the afternoon because I was exhausted from work, from putting up this persona that I had to portray, that everything's going great. And then I thought, I can't, I've got to go and do it all again because I've got to go and do something that I don't want to do because I should be here, and that vicious circle that I was stuck in. So I eventually got myself up and got myself out, went over to North Wales. I was working in Liverpool and went over to North Wales for holiday, which is about an hour and a half's drive away. And we went out on the Saturday. I didn't want to be there. And at the time, Seb, he was only 2 at the time. He wouldn't eat a piece of pizza. Just a 2-year-old, just didn't want to eat a piece of pizza. And I couldn't handle that. That was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I screamed and shouted at him, screamed and shouted at my wife and my brother-in-law that was there and his partner. And I then went and hid in the bedroom for 2 days because I couldn't deal and cope with everything. My mind was just broken. And I still got up on the Monday morning and drove to work because the pressure that I put on myself to say, if you don't go to work, all these bricklayers and machine drivers and everybody else can't work because you're not there. And if I'm honest with you, that didn't matter. I could have just turned around to work and say, can I have a bit of time off? And they would have allowed it. So as I was driving to work that day, Louise rang me, my wife, and said to me, I can't be with you anymore. You are destroying yourself. Everything you're working so hard for and you love, you are pushing it away, and you're not the person I fell in love with all those years ago. So that was my defining moment that I knew I needed to change something. And thankfully, I worked for a good company. I went to work, got everybody sorted, and rang the boss up and I said, I need to see you. So he drove from Manchester to Liverpool, and I had a chat with him in the car park outside because I got everybody working, and then I went and hid by my van because I didn't want to deal with anybody.
Right.
And he came over, I explained everything, and that's where my journey with mental health, the recovery, and getting myself back on track started for me, which was 3 years ago. Well, 6 now, so 4 years ago, and it was the hardest and best decision Louise ever made. So I got a bit of help and support. I started talking about my problems, and we worked on it. I had to change, and she knew she had to change with everything, and she came back, and it's just been a roller coaster of emotions, and it's building up to the point where a couple of years ago I thought I want to do a bit more with this, because when I went back to work, Paul said to me, what do you want to do? Do you want to go back and do your job that you're doing? Do you want to go back and laying bricks, or do you want to go and drive one of the machines that we've got? And I said to him, I was like, I'm done with the industry. I said, I've had enough. At the time, I'd done 17 years, I think it was. I said, I'm going to go and drive a van for Amazon or something like that. And again, it's still not really dealing with my problem. I was trying to run away from it.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, why don't you retrain and do your NEBOSH, which is your health and safety qualifications? He says, I'll pay for you to go to university. And I was like, yeah, if you want. He's a big guy from Northern Ireland, and he's got a big, deep, booming voice. And he gave me like a proper hairdryer treatment. Like, I don't want you to do it for me. I want you to do it for you. I want you to do something that you really love and passionate about. At the time, I thought, give me a break, will you? But I get why he did that, because he was so passionate. He's a passionate guy about what he does and the people that work for him. And I went, we're going to do a bit more on the mental health side of things. He's like, yeah, absolutely. So one of the charities that I now work for, he got in contact with them, and they put me through all my training. I did mental health first aid instructor training, and then loads of other upskill courses that I've done now. And I was doing another job in Liverpool again, and I was like, I need to get this message out. I need to change it. And racking my brains. I thought, well, why don't I come up with a podcast? And again, I rang Paul, my boss. I said, what do you think about if I did a podcast? He's like, if you think it'll help, do it. And I've done it, and I did it, and I set it up. And in that time, we were working on a big project in the middle of Manchester, and I went and gave a talk. There's about 500 people or something like that on this job, and they did a big stand down, and I gave a talk about what I'd been through and what I was aiming to do, and how I thought we can all come together and help each other. And I sort of came off stage from that, and Paul said to me, you ain't going to be working for me in 18 months. And within sort of 6-9 months, I was gone. And it was nothing to do that we'd fallen out or anything like that. He just knew my time within that business was done, and my passion had changed, and he knew I'd found my direction of which way I wanted to go. And I'm forever thankful for that, because if he hadn't given me that hairdryer treatment that day, I went and seen him, and I hadn't gone through what I'd done, and he hadn't given me the support, and Louise hadn't made that decision, if I'm honest with you, I'd still be a miserable git. It's stuck in a merry-go-round of crap. I'm not moving out, because I thought that's what life was. You go to work, you earn your money, you come home, eat, sleep, rave, repeat. I'm forever thankful for those people, and it's the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Yeah, he sounds. He sounds like a great guy. I mean, I think that he was open and flexible, and gave you that support, which I think a lot of people don't necessarily have that, which creates more of these issues. So that was fortunate, and I think it's also great that your wife probably, at a point, it doesn't always happen, right? Having someone close to you that decides to call time on something, which is a big decision, right? Because again, that forces your hand somewhat. And what is it? Do you think? I mean, I guess from your experience, what is it you think that drives people to get to the position you got to, right? We just keep going and keep going and keep going until you reach a kind of a breaking point. Is there something sort of endemic in trades? Do you think the industry that creates that?
I think because we work in such a macho, manly environment, it's perceived that we can't talk about emotions. You can't stand there and cry and show affection because you're meant to be this tough, strong alpha male. And the truth of the matter is, we can stand there and show these emotions and show affection for people, and at the same time still be a macho man and deliver these projects and be part of these great teams working on huge construction projects and down to little garden walls or patio designs. It doesn't matter what your job is and what your role is, we can still do our job, and we can still let people know that you may be struggling with something, something may be bothering you. What I did find, Mike, when I went back to work, because when I went back to work, I sort of got the lads together and I said, look, this has happened, my head's fallen off and everything. I explained everything, and then they all went to work. And when through the coming weeks after that, I'd see them individually, and most of them would turn around to me and say, you know what, kid, I felt like you when I was your age. And this happened to me. And I mean, there's two things out of that. One, it made me feel I wasn't alone in this. And two, we're all pretty much the same. It might be just a little bit different, but something can affect your life. And just because it's affecting your life, it doesn't mean you have to put up with it. But because there's such a stigma within our industry, like you can't talk about what you're feeling and you're meant to suck it up and just get on with it. It's well, if we're honest with you, it's not mental health or mental ill health. That is killing people within our industry. It's the stigma that is killing people, and it's a very sad fact.
Do you think that taboo is still there, still alive and kicking in the trades?
Especially in the UK, it is. It's changing. 100%, it's changing.
Yeah.
5 years ago, we probably wouldn't be sat here talking about I'm working on the work I'm doing with mental health within the construction industry, because it wasn't there, and it's taking huge leaps forward. Still got a very long way to go, but it's great times are coming within the industry that people are changing and evolving and understanding you don't need to scream and shout and swear and put huge pressure under people to get jobs over the line. You can do it by just talking to them like a human being, and companies are really getting on board with that and understanding. And I'm now getting a lot of work off people that are messaging me saying, can you come into our business and help us manage staff and understand how to manage our staff? It blows my mind, because all I'm doing is just going into companies and saying to them, talk to them like a human being. A great example I've got of this is that there was a window fitting company, and they had a great window fitter, one of the top fitters that they had. He declined. His work was shoddy. He was not turning up for work. He was scruffy in appearance. His van was dirty. It's these little signs. And because it's such a fast-paced industry, they were just going to get rid of him. We're going to sack him. Yeah. But luckily for him, he had a good manager, and he contacted me. I said, well, they're going to get rid of him. What do you think I can do? I said, well, have you asked him what's up? Have you spoke to them? And he's like, no, I haven't really. So he went into work the next day, spoke to him. Turns out he was going through a divorce, and his wife or ex-wife was holding the kids ransom to him. And it was destroying him inside, and he didn't know what to do and didn't know where to turn. His work found out about that. They helped him. They got him a little bit of legal aid to get him helped with his legal bill, and got him back. He's now firing on all cylinders again. He's seen his kids, and he's a happy member of staff. And off the back of that is, because I don't know what it's like over in New Zealand, but in the UK, there's a huge shortage of quality tradesmen and women. And that if they had got rid of that member of staff, that company would have had to spend the money retraining somebody to their standard of work. This guy has now stayed there. He'll be more loyal. He'll be more productive, and he won't go down the road for £2 or $3 an hour more, because he knows that he's in a company that actually care about him and want him to do well.
Well, it's a really good point, because there is a that's a worldwide problem, finding great people that are qualified. Getting them from school through to apprenticeships, etc., is an issue, and then finding good people. So that investment, whether it's in mental health or other things to keep people, I think a lot of trades businesses have probably overlooked that in previous years. And are there, you sort of touched on it there, but I guess for trade business owners or even people working together on a site, are there warning signs that you talk to people about when someone's potentially experiencing having a tough time?
Yeah, definitely there is. There's extremes with it, in the sense that somebody who is turning up late or not going home from work, somebody who is coming in and you just know that they're either, if they're normally the loud center of attention person, and they've gone really quiet and gone in on themselves, and the standard of work is slipping, the standard of their appearance is slipping, and like I said about that guy, he wasn't looking after his van, and he was a very organised and clean working person, and he was leaving like customers' houses a mess. And it's little things like that. And a lot of people say to me, exactly like you said there, how do we know? Is it the person that's screaming and shouting and saying it? I'm struggling with mental health. I said, they may be, but a lot of the time it's the people that are very quiet and very gone in on themselves, and they don't want to burden you with their problems, because they're worried about how it will affect them with their way, whether they are going to lose the job, or whether people are going to start talking about them, or they just don't want to express what they're feeling, because they don't understand what they're feeling. I never used to understand it.
Right.
And it's things that are out of the ordinary with that work colleague. And the best thing to do with it as well is ask them. You don't have to ask them outright. You don't have to say, I've noticed your mental health is not quite right. What's going on? Just have a chat with them.
Yeah.
So on a good example is this: on a morning whoever we were working for, they used to make us do a start right or safe start, or basically make sure the guys go to work in a safe manner. And I do this little talk with them, and then I might notice something's not quite right about them. I'd go off, I'd continue, I'd ask them how they're doing, and they'd always give me, yeah, I'm all right, and carry on with the work. And I'd leave them alone, but I'd make a mental note that I need to go back and check in with them. And I'd come back to them a little bit later, and I'd say, are you all right? And they'd be like, yeah, I'm all right, leave me alone. And I'd start chatting about football or cricket or whatever it might be. And I'd show a little bit of vulnerability to them. And I might say that, I've got this problem and this is worrying me at the moment. What would you do? What are your thoughts on it? And you had to do. And doing that, it sort of subconsciously gives them permission to talk, because Rob's shown a little bit of vulnerability, so I can.
Yeah.
And the conversation would go down a route. And more than anything, I'd never give them a solution to the problem, because that's not my job. I'd just be a safe ear for them to listen to, for them to talk to. And I'd just listen. And a lot of people, a lot of them used to say, I can't believe I just told you that. And I'm like, well, do you feel better for it? And they're like, you know what? Yeah, I do. I'm like, well, there you go. I get back to work. But, it's just little bits of, although it is a very serious subject, mental health, it doesn't have to be serious all the time. Do you know what I mean? You can do it in a light-hearted, normal conversation type of way. And people can get overwhelmed by like, oh, I don't know what to do. And the best way to put it in is like, you have physical first aiders, but that physical, so say you've got somebody on your site that falls over and breaks their arm, you can perform a bit of first aid. You're not there to mend that broken arm. You're there just to keep the person comfortable till the professionals turn up. And it's exactly the same with mental health first aid. You're not there to cure the problem with whatever they're going through. But if you can be a safe ear for them to talk to and be there for and just be present for them and ultimately be kind, then that you are doing your job, and that's more than enough for them to help them in that moment.
Yeah, totally. And I guess when you're if someone is listening and they're having that conversation or going through a tough time themselves, what do you recommend? I mean, in terms of like who to get in touch with, industry bodies, support networks, what's the best way to handle that sort of situation? Or if you've got an employee that you're worried about, what would you recommend on that side?
So in the UK and Ireland, there's a great charity called the Lighthouse Club. I'm actually away on tour for them at the moment, although I'm staying up at my parents' house because it's near the area where they live. So they are an industry charity that are 100% construction focused, and they can help you with your physical, financial and mental health. They run a 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week helpline. They run a tech service and an app. They're all very much the same thing, but not everybody wants to ring up and speak to somebody. So there's plenty of options to go at them. And they can help you with everything from your tax return, legal advice, mental health and wellbeing support. If you broke your arm and you can't work, they will help support you with that and get you back on your feet. If you're struggling to pay your bills, they won't hand you out a big chunk of money, but what they could do is they could pay your mortgage payment for 3 months. So you're back on your feet. It just gives you a bit of breathing space. The services that they provide are second to none. It's unbelievable. And if there's something within their in-house staff that they can't do, they will outsource it and they will find it, and they have partners that work in it, and they bring those together, and they will look after you and take you through your journey with them. And it's all 100% free. It's totally free. There's it's totally anonymous as well. Your employer will never ever find out about it, and it's there to support not only the construction worker but their immediate family as well. So they've just helped my mother-in-law with grief counselling because my father-in-law died about 18 months ago, and Maria was really struggling with it, and they supported her and got her to the place where she's like, you know what, I think I can do this on my own. I'm feeling a lot better. I'm glad I've done this now. And again, if Maria turns around in 3 months' time, 6 years' time, whatever it might be, I feel like I need a little bit of support. Absolutely, it's there again, and it's all completely free. And it's all funded by the industry as well. So they do golf days and barbecues and sponsored walks and all that sort of stuff. And there's more and more charities. I do work with another guy called Steve, who runs one called Construction Sport, and he does a lot with. So he uses sport as a therapy, and he does a lot of training. And he's very similar to me. He's probably about 4 or 5 years further down the line than where I am, and he's a great guy, so supportive. And he brings people together. He's catchline, he's building teams to save lives, and it absolutely is. And there's Band of Builders and a few other ones that are out there. So it is there to help. If ultimately is start the conversation with people. If you notice something, ask them if they spoke to the GP. Because a lot of people think they're just going to get prescribed medicine, but it doesn't always work. It works for some people, it doesn't work for others. Whatever works for you, go with it, go with the flow, because ultimately you want to get yourself better. And there's lots of options. There's other stuff in the UK. There's Samaritans and there's Papyrus, and there's a few other charities that are there for people. But the ones that are 100% construction focused and orientated, Lighthouse Club, Construction Sport, they are the main ones that I'm involved with. I'm an ambassador to both of those.
Yeah, cool.
And they're just there to help.
Yeah, they sound great. And you sort of touched on relationships. I think one of the things we often see is, often a sole trader or business owner keeps it all to themselves, or they might have a few staff and they're worried about, they don't want to tell their staff because they don't want their staff worrying about, I'm not going to have a job if there's an issue, those types of things. Any advice around that? I mean, based on your own experience of what you went through and sort of reaching that point, any advice on how to deal with that from your own personal relationships? There's obviously talking to third parties and talking to people at work, but anything about how you would manage your relationships in your own home life?
I think definitely be open and honest with it all, because I was keeping everything to myself. Like my wife used to say to me, "Why don't you talk to me about it?" I'm like, "Because you will try and solve my problem, and I don't need that. I just need somebody to listen to me and try and help me, not try and solve the problem."
Yeah.
And I think that's why speaking to a complete and utter stranger is quite easy for people, because you're not in the social circles of family or work circles, whatever it might be. But ultimately, if you come into that point where you're noticing that it's having a detrimental effect on you, then speak to them, be open and honest, even if it's the most difficult conversation, because that conversation, or you're chewing yourself up inside because you're like, I know what they're going to say to me. We don't know what people are going to say to us. A lot of the time, right. When I started talking about it, I'm going to get an absolute roast in here, or they're going to start speaking to me like I'm a stupid person. And ultimately, when I did, they were like, "Why did you not come and talk to me earlier?"
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to deal with whatever you're going through before it gets to a crisis point. And I let my problems get to a crisis point.
Yeah.
And it's ultimately just start talking, being open and honest as you want. Try not to hold. I mean, don't go on. If you don't want to go and bare your soul, don't bare your soul. But start just talking about it. It might take 2 or 3, 4, 5 attempts to do it, but each time you'll feel that weight lifting and it getting easier and easier and easier to talk about.
Yeah, and it's really good advice. Any advice for business owners or people on site that they should think about culturally that they would change or do differently based on everything you've learned and seen?
Ultimately, just be kind to people, because you never, ever know what somebody's going through. And there might be somebody screaming and shouting at you on site, but you don't know why they got to that position. There could be something that is troubling those to get to that point where they have got a short fuse and they are miserable and horrible, because that pretty much used to be me. And you never know how your words can make a huge impact in somebody's life. And if somebody is coming to a crisis point and is on the edge, and you go and scream and shout, you could make that person's day even worse. But if you are kind to them and you are listening to them and present with them, you could have a life-changing effect on their life.
Yeah, 100%. And your example, I think, with your boss was is a great one, right? Could have been a very different outcome. You weren't lucky enough to have someone like that in your corner, so that's really powerful. And Rob, this is great. And I mean, I think it's really admirable that you sort of stepped forward and stepped up. And I think the more people that are doing this and talking about their experiences, the more people feel comfortable, and that stigma starts to be removed. Obviously, it takes time. Are you seeing more people get in touch with you now you're doing the podcast that come on the show and are happy to talk about their experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I try and do one podcast a month, because it's trying to fit it in, and as you know, with the editing side of things and making sure everybody's diary works. And I could do a podcast every single week if I had the time and set up to do that. but I'm still working and at the moment doing like that. It's great, and it's amazing to see that people are having the courage to come forward and talk about it. And they said that they've listened to I mean, I've had the work I'm doing now. I know it's saving lives, because Christmas Day just gone, I had a message off somebody saying I was going to go and take my own life. I found your podcast and it changed my life. Wow. It has made me change my mind, and I check in with that person every now and again, and they're doing good. They still have down days, but they have more good days than down days. But that person is still here. They're still alive. They're still working because of the work that I get up to now. And that's, again, that goes back to the comment I made before, that this is the most fulfilled I've ever felt in my life, to getting the most job satisfaction out of anything I've ever done.
Yeah, I'm not surprised with that. Just that story alone is pretty incredible. And there is this wonderful support network in the trades. I see it on social media where, people will reach out to each other, and even when they don't know each other, I think sometimes that's actually more, to your earlier point, is more powerful, because there's no judgment. No one's trying to solve problems. They don't know you, right? They'll just listen and help you out. Cool. Fantastic. It's been a great conversation. And just for those that aren't already listening to your podcast, what's the best way to find you?
So you can listen to us on all the major podcast platforms, or you can head over to our YouTube page. It's the MYH podcast on YouTube, and all the other platforms. And like I say, it comes out once a month. I try and get them out in the middle of the month, but sometimes they're at the beginning, sometimes they're at the end. It's whenever we can fit it in and make it work. But it's just thank you to everybody that has listened to the podcast and supports us with the work that we do. And thank you to the guys over at Tradify for having us on, because ultimately I couldn't do what I do without the help and support of everybody within the industry that help me help everybody. Do you know what I mean? It's just amazing to be part of this community.
Yeah, no, you're doing great work. It's an issue we see and speak to virtually every trade person I speak to at some point in time. And it's a worldwide problem. It's not just a UK problem. It's an issue that's been wrestled with, and people are still slightly shy at coming forward in many instances because of that taboo, stigma, whatever you want to call it, that still exists within the trade. So I think the more of this type of stuff that's going on, the better. So yeah, really appreciate it, Rob. Great work. Thanks for joining the podcast. For those that are listening, if you do want to, we'll include some links in the episode. If you are struggling, you're not alone. There, we'll put some links in the podcast notes so you can see the resources that are available. And I highly recommend listening to Rob's podcast, which is a good listen on this very subject. Cool. Rob, appreciate you joining. Thanks for spending the time, and we'll chat to you soon. Thank you.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me on.
And that brings us to the end of this episode. Behind the Tools is brought to you by Tradify, job management software for your trade business. If you enjoyed the podcast, let us know by leaving a review, and be sure to tell your mates about it. Email behindthetools@tradifyhq.com if you or someone you know would be keen to join the show as a guest.